live event for South Asian Heritage Month this afternoon. So I'm really excited to be able to host this live event. This means a lot to me, being of South Asian heritage and actually celebrating South Asian Heritage Month this year for the first time across pharmacy. And it's been really nice to work with different organisations, so with Pharmacy Technicians of Colour, APTUC, some members from the Boots team, and also Mahendra Patel and Sam to help put this together. And we're going to talk more about what we're going to do across the month, and also looking at the contributions that South Asian heritage people have made into pharmacy. So before I start the session, I'd just like to say a massive Eid Mubarak to everyone who's celebrating this week. What a great week to start South Asian Heritage Month with Eid. So I hope everyone's enjoying the sunshine and the heat and making the most of that for their Eid celebrations. I'm really excited to have a great panel today to discuss the contributions that South Asian communities have made into pharmacy. So we have Pam, who's a pharmacy programme facilitator at Health Education England, joined by Kulpna, who's one of the co-founders and Pharmacy Technicians of Colour, Jat, who is chief pharmacist at Marsden, transitioning to become chief pharmacist at UCLH, and also Yousaf Ahmed, who is a chief pharmacist at Practice Group. So welcome everybody. Before I ask everyone to talk about themselves and ask you questions, I thought it'd be really good to just explain why South Asian Heritage Month is so important for us as a profession and what the aim of the month is. So we already know that pharmacy is a diverse profession, and if you look at the GPHC equality data from 2019, it says that we're 12% of the pharmacy technicians are from an Asian and Asian British background, and 37% of pharmacists are from an Asian and Asian British background. So we have a lot of South Asian heritage in pharmacy that we should really be celebrating and acknowledging. So what is South Asian Heritage Month? It's a month that runs from 18th of July to 17th of August, and it seeks to raise the profile of British South Asian heritage and history in the UK, with the goal of helping people to better understand the diversity within the community and in present day Britain. And South Asian influences can be found everywhere in Britain, so from the food, music, clothes, and even in pharmacy. So there is even its own stereotype, as an Asian community pharmacist man owns a community pharmacy, so an Asian man we've got our own stereotype within the profession. So it does resonate with us a lot. And so the dates are significant because they represent the dates of which the Indian Independence Act in 1947 was given royal assent on the 18th of July. And then on the 17th of August, it was when the borders were established as part of the independence. So this month is really important in South Asian heritage. And then also, just to kind of highlight the diversity of South Asia, the countries that are included in that, it includes Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So you can see the breadth of the communities that are part of that. So the aim of the panel today is just to provide an opportunity to highlight and showcase the contributions of South Asian heritage within pharmacy, people doing different roles, sharing and celebrating successes and experiences, and then thinking about the challenges that people may have experienced and what more we can do to make sure there's representation across the profession. So, and also it's a really good opportunity to think about our own cultural backgrounds. We've all had different experiences and how they influence in the way we are pharmacists and pharmacy technicians and how we practice and what we bring to our teams. So that's enough from me, and I can't wait to now introduce members of our panel. So from each of the panel members, if you tell me a little bit about yourselves, what your backgrounds are and the roles that you've undertaken and how you've ended up doing those roles. So I'll start with Kulpna.
Hey, hi everybody, thank you for joining us. Obviously my name is Kulpna and I'm a British Indian, so born in Coventry. My mother was born and raised in India. My father was born in Mozambique, and because of ancestors migrating during the British Empire, that's how they ended up in Mozambique. And I think that's just important, just to give an outline of my sort of background and my heritage and how that means to me. As I was growing up, I wasn't really sure where I fitted in, and I didn't really appreciate my heritage. I was the only Indian in my class when I was at school, and I tried to be something that I wasn't. So it was quite confusing in some ways, because I was going home, you know, celebrating family, food, you know, doing lots of colourful things, and then going to school and thinking, oh God, I've got to behave differently. But very much was a carer from a young age, because that's how, you know, most families live, and raised my brother while my parents worked quite hard through all the hours that they did. And I think that led me to being a very practical person. But it also meant that I wasn't very academic either. So I used to not go to school so well. But I was introduced to pharmacy originally by an uncle, and you know, and that was quite important. He was a pharmacist, and he was showing me different medicines and what it all meant, and you know, and I was all excited about that. And then what followed from that was when we went to India a few months later, and that was our first sort of real visit as a family. And just because I'd recently sort of worked with my uncle in his little shop, I became quite fascinated how pharmacies worked in India as well. And it was quite interesting, because they'd give you a couple of big pills or tablets, as they say, and that would dispense by a compounder. The pharmacist would be sitting at the end doing all the financial bits, adding the calculator and taking the money. And you know, a couple of days of those big pills that you take, all of a sudden you're fine, you're healthy again, sort of thing. So it really intrigued me, and it amazed me how they managed to keep all their medicines as strips, not in boxes, stacked up on the shelves really high up to the ceiling. So as a result, you know, I kind of started getting really interested in pharmacy, and that's what kind of led me to pharmacy. And as I mentioned, I wasn't very academic, so I didn't do very well in my A-levels. So university offered me a chemistry degree, and I thought, no, I'm going to go into pharmacy in another way. Unfortunately, I became a dispenser in community, and I sort of worked up the ladder through that. And I think that's important people know that, because, you know, I did have to work hard, you know, and it was just around sort of some of the sort of academic aspects of it. But also sort of learning how to engage with other colleagues, how to engage with patients. It was just very different atmosphere. As I got older, and after the loss of my mother, I think I started to then appreciate my heritage more. And I do look back and I think I wish I'd asked about it. I wish I'd sort of sat down and thought about it and sort of looked at the history. And I think, if anything, one of the things that I think and I feel very passionate about is that I feel this is about the British Empire, and I think this should be in our education. You know, we should be learning this at GCSE level, you know, and it's really important. This kind of led me into a pharmacy technician role. So, you know, I did my training around that. And as part of that, I've sort of developed through education and training, and undertaken some leadership roles, varied. And at the moment, I'm currently in an education role. But also, I am one of the co-founders of the Pharmacy Technicians of Colour. And we started that last year because of the COVID-19, you know, recognising the disproportionality affecting the BAME community, and as a result of the death of George Floyd. And our aim was really to sort of look at the support and educate pharmacy technicians and raise awareness within the profession. And I think it's, you know, South Asian Heritage Month has been a really good aspect for us. And myself and one of my other co-founders will be leading a workshop at the NHSCI with APT UK and RPS in the Joint National Inclusive Pharmacy Practice around allyship. So please feel free to join that as well. But that's how I've ended up where I am today.
Thank you, Kulpna. I think look, we can all resonate with some of the bits that you've said, especially the India story. I remember when I was in India, everything's fixed by glucose infusion, everything. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Jat, how about yourself?
Hi, everybody. First of all, Aman, thank you for arranging this and inviting us. And I suppose I'll give you just a really potted history of how I've got to where I am, and some of it resonates, I'm sure, with the other people, and certainly with Kulpna's story there. So similarly, parents who came to England in early 60s, and it was interesting. I was born in the 1969, and I was the youngest of 4 children, and I saw from a very young age how my parents, who were both working class, had to work incredibly hard. And growing up in the 70s and 80s was not easy for people of colour. I think that's fair to say. And that meant also job opportunities for people. When my father studied medicine in India, ended up being a bus driver here in the UK. My mother worked in a factory. And but what I saw with both of them, and what they stressed to all of us, like to a lot of the South Asian communities, was about hard work, that honesty, focus on education, and work hard so that you can have an opportunity that perhaps they wouldn't get and didn't get. And you see how people, I grew up the youngest of all. You look at how people treat and how people might speak to your family, and you realise actually that must seem very difficult, but it took a huge amount of pride in how they looked and how they celebrated Indian festivals. But you were a minority, absolutely, and that was always challenging. But they always stressed about working us hard, making sure we worked hard and educated. Like all good Indian families, one became a doctor, one became a pharmacist, one became a teacher, and one became in IT. I don't think you can get more typical than that, really, out of 4 children. And I chose pharmacy. I think when I got to about 17, I wasn't really quite sure what I wanted to do, and didn't want to do medicine. It felt like a lot of hard work for my sister, who was going through that. And pharmacy looked like a good professional program and degree to go through to, and I enjoyed doing the sciences. And then when I did eventually get through qualifying, and my first job, I remember qualifying, working in a hospital in Birmingham for the Monday to Friday, and then working really hard on weekends and doing locums. And I did that for 2 solid years while doing my clinical diploma. And I look back on it and think, my God, I don't even know how I had the energy to do that. But that's just how I thought we had to do, because I just saw my parents working 6 or 7 days a week. I thought that was the norm. But after doing 2 years and getting a postgraduate diploma, I then realised there wasn't that many opportunities for pharmacist posts in the early 90s. And so moved down to London, and just took a punt on a temporary post as a resident pharmacist in Lewisham Hospital. But I really realised that I began to enjoy applying my knowledge in a hospital setting more than a community pharmacy setting. And in my first 2 years, if I'm honest, I could have gone either way. I wasn't really sure what I enjoyed. But as I did my diploma and got more into the clinical side, I began to think, actually, I can see a real difference here to patient care. And I think from there onwards, just focused on taking good opportunities and going down a specialist route, and going off to clinical services manager at Barts, but having spent 5 years at King's before that. And then I did a unusual thing where I took a year out. And thought, actually, you know what? If I know this is going to be my career, and I'd like to get to a chief level at some point, but I took a year out, went traveling, and that really was probably one of the highlights for me. It made me pause, made me reflect on my life, with the lady I was with then, who's now my wife, which is lovely. So we came back, and then ended up becoming a chief pharmacist in 2004. So I've been a chief now for 17 years. And I think when I first became chief, I was rather young at that stage, and I was really, really still learning. I knew you could do a lot of hard work. I didn't think I was always the brightest, if I'm honest, but I knew I had to work. I had an ethic of working hard, but I had to work really hard to prove I could be a good chief pharmacist. And that's always carried on. But the other thing that it always taught me was that when you're in that position, you've really got to look after the people around you. And I say that for 2 reasons. Number one, my parents always taught me to do that. They always said, look after the people you work with, because that's really important. My first chief job was in Ealing Hospital, and I would say I think 60% of the department were probably from an Asian background. And so in many ways, it felt this felt like it was just naturally important. You know, the figures you quoted earlier, Aman, about the mix in the profession, absolutely you see that in hospital. So something about embracing diversity and being inclusive just came really naturally, because that's important to me and it's really core to my principles. But I did have challenges. And, you know, the comment I think you said about the cliched man, I still remember somebody very senior, this is when I'm a chief, bear in mind, somebody very senior saying to me once, how's your corner shop doing? That was in a hospital environment. So I still like that when I was a chief. When I was just working, getting more senior in an organization, somebody saying to me, oh, we're lacking staff. Surely you must have lots of relatives you can just bring in. You know, it was a lot of cliche things. And, you know, the two in both of those incidents, it's really important that people understand this, is I did go and challenge those individuals, even though they were very senior in the organization. I challenged it with, you know, great deal of respect and dignity, but I did say how A, it was unacceptable, and B, how that really couldn't continue again, and how I would take that forward. And I found that when you do challenge it, actually you can also educate at the same time, and you can also try and make a change. It's unforgivable having those comments from the beginning, but if I couldn't address it in that position, then it would happen to people even lower down to me. So since then, I suppose, you know, I've learned and I've had lots of challenges as you go through, but I think I've always tried to build my chief pharmacist career from really trying to look out for your staff. And a couple of them know this, that I do try and spend every morning where I just go and meet all the staff and just talk to the staff, because that's just, it's important. You know, I think as a leader, but also for me personally, I feel like you've got to connect with your teams and your staff, and you get to pick up on those cues when things aren't quite right. And I'm sure we'll touch about that later on about leadership, but you know, how do you know and how do you understand your staff when you're giving up so much for you to deliver your services? I think least you can do is get to know your staff and be visible and engaging. So I'll pause there and allow the others to talk, otherwise we'll run out of time.
Brilliant, thank you. That was amazing, Jack. Thank you very much. And Pam, how about yourself?
Well, I didn't know the role of pharmacy technicians existed. I mean, I wanted to get a spaceship and go to space when I was little. So I remember my parents saving up to get me a telescope, which is obviously in the attic now. I guess for my role, I started working in independent community pharmacy with a husband and wife team, and the wife of a South Asian heritage background. And they were almost like my work parents. You know, my parents, very much like Jack's, working 6 to 7 days a week. You know, mum was working from home, she's working in factories. Dad had his own electric shop to work on, you know, in various businesses. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then on a whim, I applied for an ATO post at UCLH. And that's when my eyes kind of were, whoa, there's so much to pharmacy here. And I kind of said it just kind of went from there, completed training and so forth. But halfway through, I did want to be a teacher. I wanted to be in education. I mean, that was one of the moments I went to university, so I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to get into education to teach and help others. That didn't quite plan out as planned either. And then the pharmacist I was working with actually said, oh, you know, think about doing the M-Pharm. And I just thought, oh, really don't fancy resitting my chemistry. You know, I've kind of blown it out once. I don't want that result again. It's okay. You know, I'm happy working as your assistant in the chemist, and it's good. But as the roles developed, I obviously got into the pharmacy technician role, and it is absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't change it for the world. You know, it's opened up my eyes. It's given me a lot of experience and confidence. You know, I've been involved in various things. I've been a national officer with APT UK with education and development and advanced practice. I've been the branch chair to make sure that that pharmacy technician community in London have a place to go and learn from each other and network. Currently, I'm one of the regional champions for NHS projects in London. So making sure that everybody's aware of project futures and the items that are there outside of pharmacy that I can bring in. You know, I'm heavily involved in the HE Women's Network. You know, my role spans across all pharmacy programs that we're delivering within the region, you know. And I think a lot of that, again, going back to constantly working hard, is the ethics that I've kind of got from my parents, seeing them work constantly. You know, they were both born in India. Dad came over here in the 60s with his family, you know, then got married to mum. Mum came over in the late 70s, you know, and kind of seeing them build that relationship and within their community as well. You know, we've lived in the same house. I say we, obviously I moved out, but like, you know, mum's still there with my brother and sister. They've lived in the same house for 30 years plus, and like they are the key people in that community, you know, and that's shown to me actually this is really nice that we've done things to the community. And very much like Kulpna, I didn't really know where I fitted in when I was a kid. You know, I went to an all-girls school in New Cross, which was fantastic, a lot of diversity, had lots of friends. Then I went to university, and all of a sudden I was pushed into the Indian background, as you can see. You know, got to watch Bollywood movies. Not a huge Bollywood fan, I'll put it out there. There's only a couple I love. The Bhangra scene, obviously, is me. Bhangra is in my blood, the way I see it. You know, my uncle had a band. Obviously, if I did not support him, that would be really bad. So I didn't really know where I fitted in. And I think very much like Jack, there was some comments that were always passed. I think the one I always get to me was like, you're not a typical Indian girl, especially the last 10, 15 years where I've kind of come out of my shell a bit more. At first, you know, you laugh it off and you think, yeah, I know what you mean. And then I go home and thought, well, actually, what do they mean? What is a typical Indian girl? What are you trying to get at? You know, I'm very much a challenging person now. I wasn't at the beginning. At the beginning, it was like, keep your head down, keep working. You know, you don't want to disrupt the status quo. You don't want to upset anyone. But now I've got to a point in my life where I will say, what do you mean by that? Do you want to expand on it? Do you understand what you've just said and how it's made me feel? So I've definitely learned myself. I've become a different person in the last 7 or 8 years, I would say. So, yeah. I could go on about spaceships and stuff all day.
No, brilliant. Thank you for sharing, Pam. I can completely resonate with that. I get told a lot that I don't look like an Indian girl. I don't seem like a typical Indian girl. I don't even know what that means. But you know, you just kind of, it's not always helpful when it comes from your own parents either. But that's just one of those things. Yousaf, how about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Aman, and thank you again for pulling us together. And Eid Mubarak to everyone, and I hope you've survived all the meat eating that you've been having the last couple of days. And equally, Kulpna, Pam, and Jat, you pointed that we're all shaking our heads to everyone's story because it chimes with all of us. So just a quick background about me, and I'll be very brief and conscious of the time. So I'm one of those strange Pakistani Muslim boys with a Scottish accent that it's quite unique, but also I think for me really hones into kind of my background. So I'm from a strong Muslim background of Pakistani parents, with my grandfather coming here in the 60s. My father was born here, so he's probably second generation, but my mother's from Pakistan. And we grew up in a house where problem solving and work ethic was everything. Glasgow working class background where we found strength in our labour. And I was taught very early, as many people from our heritage, that education is the key to life. And I wasn't a terribly smart person. I mean, when Jack was mentioning it, it took me a lot to become clever or to just be above average. So I remember that I had a lot of studying to do. And I spent a lot of my kind of, even when I was in school, just constantly with my nose in my book. So I wasn't, and I think that's perhaps quite resonant in Asian homes, that, you know, pushing that education bucket. But also what I learned quite early on was the value of people, honesty, integrity, trust, and valuing people was kind of key cornerstones of my life, and also valuing family ties, which I think is quite common throughout, you know, the South Asian heritage. So I found myself in pharmacy because I had to go into some science degree, didn't I? I wasn't clever enough for medicine, I don't think. So I went into pharmacy and I kind of fell into it, you know, and, you know, it's one of those things that I just went for it. And lo and behold, it was something that I enjoyed. I spent a lot of time in university just finding myself. And I think many people in South Asian backgrounds spend a lot of time finding themselves, even at uni or at work. I didn't really know who I was, to be honest. I was Asian, I was Muslim, I was Scottish. Who was I? I was all three, I was all four. So I spent a lot of my formative years in my early 20s just kind of finding out who I was, doing, through interaction with people and through experience. And even when I started as a basic grade in hospital, and again, and similar to many stories, I kind of worked all the time. I just worked all the time, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in the hospital, Saturday, Sunday, locuming, similar to when Jack was saying. I was nodding my head there. I always worked, and I think that's quite common in the Asian heritage. Our work ethic is our cornerstone. And I think that makes us not only reliable, but also people that are problem solvers. I always found a way to make things work. So hospital was my life, to be honest, and I knew I loved community pharmacy, but I knew hospital because it made me uncomfortable, and I think that's what pushed me. And the more I got into it, the more I thought, yeah, this is for me. And typically, what I found in my career early on was that I always worked Christmas holidays, Easter holidays. I always worked when my white colleagues couldn't work or didn't want to work. But equally, early on in my career, I kind of was I wouldn't want to use this in a derogatory term, but I think I was the donkey of the department. I just did all the hard work without rocking the boat. And I think what Pam mentioned early on, I didn't rock the boat early on because of that importance of doing well at work. And then later on, when confidence grew, when my understanding and awareness grew, I was able to actually stand my ground and say, actually, this is what I will do and what I wouldn't do, and challenge that. So for the last couple of years, I've been a chief pharmacist at an organisation which employs over 150 pharmacy professionals. But also, I've been able to achieve a lot. In particularly, recently been appointed to the General Pharmaceutical Council as a council member, and that happened at the height of the pandemic, April 2020. And, I still kind of have to pinch myself to say that a working class boy who perhaps didn't have big dreams kind of rose to a very senior level in the world of pharmacy. But I have to also say to myself, it's due to the work you put in. It's due to the work you put in. We need to tell ourselves that we are worthy to be where we are in our life. I think that's one of the things that I think is important for us to celebrate. I'll hand it back to you, Evan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Yousaf. Again, lots of nods, because I think we can all resonate with that, and the hard working element really comes through. Just picking up on the theme that everybody's highlighted about trying to fit in. I'll put a link in at the end for everyone else who's listening, but there's a really good series on BBC Sounds that's called £3 in My Pocket. I don't know if anyone's come across it, but it's about the immigration story, and it really just resonates with what we're all saying and our experiences. But that's definitely worth a listen for anyone who would like to understand that experience more. It's definitely something that you should take away. So just kind of, I know we've touched on a bit of this already, but what challenges have you faced, or stereotypes that you've had to overcome, and in your roles or culturally? So I'll start with Pam this time round.
So I guess the typical one is that I'm a pharmacy technician in a pharmacist world. I think Kulpna's been here before and she's said the same. But I am at that point now where I can turn around and say, yep, I can do this. And it's a nice moment. It's like that mentally mic drop moment that you have. I mean, for an example, when I first started this job with Health Education England, my role is predominantly working for the pre-registration pharmacist programme, foundation training year programme. There will be errors made here. And when I was delivering a teaching session to the trainees, I had somebody from a trust come up and say, are you the right person for this? And I started to doubt myself. So I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I am the right person. I know this. I know what I'm talking about, and I can deliver this. So, I mean, there's various examples there. The other one is being female. I think I've had previously pushback. I've gone through several rounds of IVF, all ending in miscarriages, so we won't go into that. That's a topic for another day. But there's been items where I wanted to apply for courses and jobs, and they know that I'm going through this, and then being told, oh, should you apply? Because then you're going to have to tell them you're pregnant, and you're going to have to take maternity leave, or you're going to have to ask for time off, you know. And then there's obviously the cultural side where they will say, but it's okay because your family can look after your kid, because that's what Indian families do, don't they? They just kind of plow in. And that got to me quite early on. And I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't apply. And up till this day, I still regret not pushing through, not because of what happened in my personal life, but the fact is I could be in that job role now. You know I could do that job. And it's almost having this thing that if you're female and you're brown, you know, can you not apply for a job if you're trying for a family? And I know many other females will be able to resonate with this. So now I have friends and colleagues ask me, and I've always said, apply. You've got nothing to lose. They can't stop you. If you want it, go for it. You can have it all. You can have a family. You can have your career, you know. And then most recently, I've started looking back at times and places where I've been overlooked for things, you know, and my white colleague has managed to get ahead of the table. We've got the same skill set. We applied at the same time, and the feedback for me was being very generic. At the time, I didn't question it. I didn't push it because, again, just wanted to get on with my job. You know, I was grateful I had a job. I had, you know, my career was building. But now looking back at it, I really wished I'd challenged some of the options and kind of asked, why not me? And see what the issue was. Yeah. They're my top 3 at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Pam, for something really personal as well. I really appreciate that.
That's fine.
Kulpna?
Okay, so obviously, you know, equally what Jat has said and Pam has said is around some of the sort of cultural aspects and what's being said around that. So, you know, one of the challenges I've faced is about, you know, working extra or doing extra hours. And it is around, you know, you live at home with your father, your brother, your sister-in-law, they can look after your dad, you can come to work. And I think they're the sort of things, you know, people don't understand, you know, and it is a challenge of how you deal with that, because it's very difficult for a father to have a daughter-in-law help him dress. And that's just the way that our culture is, that you don't ask your daughter-in-law, it's not appropriate, sort of thing. And I think the other thing is, you know, being of a dark skin, you know, and that whole stereotype, you know, I have had British Indians say to me, oh, you're a bit dark, you know, because they're quite, you know, so it's not like it's just one, you know, way sort of thing. It is looking at that. And that did break my confidence very much, and probably sort of resonates why in my career as well, that I do lack that confidence. But I have learned to manage that and gradually build my confidence up around that. And I think working in an environment that is inclusive has helped that sort of thing. And I think the other thing for me really is, you know, and I think is a challenge just generally for us as professionals, is catering for our diverse population. You know, we know that 1 in 20 person is from a South Asian heritage background. But if you look at some of the patient information, you know, rashes on skin and things like that, it doesn't cater for that. And I know, like, I've had skin issues and I'm like, oh, is that a rash or is that, you know, I can't tell, sort of thing. So I think, you know, for me to cater for, you know, sort of a diverse population is very difficult as well. So, you know, they're the sort of things that I feel for me as a challenge. But equally, as Pam says, being a pharmacy technician, being a woman has been difficult. You know, it has been a challenge, but, you know, I am learning. And I think some of the work that's been going on has helped. Sharing and educating our experience has helped. And I think as a country, you know, it is going to start changing gradually. Yeah.
Thank you, Kulpna. And that's such an important point about where that discrimination or challenge can sometimes come. It doesn't always have to come from outside. It can also be within the South Asian community as well. Jat, I'll same question to you now as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it is fascinating listening to the experiences of others. And I'll only say a couple of bits, because I want to make sure Yousaf has enough time as well. I suppose, look, what have we experienced? You've heard bits, and we've all heard variations of what, you know, both Pam and Kulpna are saying. And I suppose, you know, for me, sometimes when you're the chief pharmacist and you're working predominantly with exec directors, the proportion of people from a South Asian heritage is significantly smaller at that exec level. And so the people who are often you're working with now are just, you know, I think it's a bit more of a challenge, being frank. And it's the subtleties that come in at this stage. So the direct comments that you've just heard there, unacceptable, but it gets even harder sometimes when it's just subtle. It's the tone in which you might be spoken to. It's maybe the way they might speak to you as they might speak to somebody else that nobody would really quite understand except for me. And when you're on the receiving end of it. And it's hard because you might be in this position in pharmacy, but believe me, it can still be really challenging. And often it can be quite a lonely place as a chief pharmacist when you've got a large team and you're trying to work with a team that's quite alien to you sometimes. And I think there's a real challenge there still, because there's one thing now, we're seeing more diversity at a very senior level in pharmacy, but really at a higher level in organizations, we're not seeing it. And there is still a challenge there. There's still a bit of a glass ceiling that I think I haven't worked out how we get through that. One of the things that I suppose I try and do, and some of this just works for me, you know, I try and be respectful. I try and be not just good, I have to be better than good sometimes. That's an awful thing to say, but I honestly feel that. I know I might not be naturally bright, but I also know there's another challenge that will remain quite difficult to put your finger on, but I know I have to be even better to be successful. And that can be really challenging. And, you know, people might think when you get to a chief level, you might be quite confident in your abilities. Believe me, we're not. Well, I'm not. And I still think, oh my God, I've got to prove everything. I might chair the RPS here group and, you know, just been put onto the King's Fund Advisory Council. I mean, my God, I never thought I'd get to that point. However, I still constantly doubt myself. And there is that element that I think just comes with what you've grown up with. I don't take any of that for granted. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing because you always appreciate it and you appreciate your staff. And there's two things I would say that I try and do as a result of that. Number one is never forget, I think, how important it is to also support the development of your teams, all your teams, but particularly pay attention to those people that might find it a bit harder with everything that we've just heard here. And that's about being curious. It is about inquiring. It is about having it in mind. But it's also, again, what I said earlier on about connecting with your staff so you can pick up those little cues, the isolation, perhaps as some people might feel. I mean, the term sometimes is about being an ally. And I think that's becoming more into our vocabulary, and it's really important right now. But I would also say, don't be afraid to be the person you are. And I want to encourage that in people. I don't, you know, like many of us, we would have had challenges growing up, almost trying to fit into, well, I don't know what really. It's because we're just trying to fit in, aren't we? And actually, the older I'm getting, I think I'm beginning to feel a little bit more, and I say this cautiously, a little bit more that actually, you know what, Jack, just be you, because I think it's going to be all right. And importantly, it's the message you're sending to all of your staff as well, that it is okay to just be yourself. So look, those are just some of my thoughts as we were just talking about. Let Yousaf come in from there.
Brilliant, thank you, Jack. And Yousaf?
Thank you. I can listen to Jack forever. I would firstly say, Pam and Kulpna, I love pharmacy technicians. We love you. We love you. And whoever doesn't, come and speak to me and Jack will sort them out. Just a couple of things to end on. I would say, I would strongly echo, be yourself. I wasn't myself until the last year or two, I'll be honest with you. I have been Yousaf at work and Yousaf at home, and that's twice as hard. I want to be just Yousaf. So be who you are. And I think that some of the challenges quickly I faced was around being able to pray. I used to tell people I'm doing something else, but I used to go and pray because I was scared to tell them. Why is that? Why is that? And I'd say to anyone, be yourself. And if you need to go and pray as a Muslim. That's very important to us. Also, what Kulpna mentioned around the culture diversity in our environments, such as simple things such as having halal food. It's only when I moved to London that I understood, what embracing and being an ally is, because in Scotland, we're still far behind in understanding what South Asian culture is. There's still a perception of corner shop, still a perception of working class nothing to do with professionalism, and we need to break that everywhere. And I think the last thing that I would probably want to just add to was that look after each other. And similar what Jack mentioned, look after each other. Be the person that people can align to, but also can open up to. We need to support each other. And sometimes we can be our worst enemies. We need to support each other and break that superficial glass ceiling, because it's right, in the higher echelons of life, it gets very colorless, and we need to stop that. And we can only do that by being together. Stronger we are is when we are together. I'll hand back to you, Alan. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I could talk about this all afternoon, but I'm going to sadly have to bring it to an end. And there was a couple of questions that we'd hoped we'd discuss, but I know we've kind of touched on them. I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's taken part today. And also, it's been such a privilege to be able to have this conversation. It's probably the first time that a group of us are able to have a conversation on a platform like this in pharmacy. And I'm really glad that we're here as a profession to be able to have these discussions. So it's been a massive privilege to have this conversation. So hopefully everyone's really enjoyed listening, and we've got 3 more events coming up every Wednesday, and next week we'll be focusing on showcasing South Asian women leaders in pharmacy, so please do join us back again. Pharmacy Technicians of Colour are hosting a Twitter chat, and Pam, just remind me on what date it was?
So it's on Tuesday the 3rd of August, so we'll start filtering the questions out probably about 6:30 p.m. we're hoping to kick off at 7 p.m.
Brilliant, thank you. And then on the 12th of August, we've got a quiz night in the evening, and we'll send out details of how to register. So I just want to say another final thank you to our panel, and have a good day, and thank you for listening.